coalition government. We're here to talk about a whole lot of things. But let's get started with the opening karakia. So, Zane.
Oh, awesome.
Thank you.
E tū tātou. Ko tō rongo mai. Kia tau te rongo mai. Ki tēnei piringa, ki tēnei nohoanga, ki ēnei tāngata. Wete a ngā tāmitanga. Kia aho te nākau. Kia wātea te hiningaro. Kia takatū te kiko. Ko tō hau ki mua. Ko tō hau ki o autake. Ko tō hau ki tō hui ngā tāngata. He hui ngā tāngata, he noho ana kōrero, he kaupapa kātū. Ka puta, ka ora. Tūturu whakamaua kia tīna.
Tīna.
Haumi e hui e.
Tai e.
Aura.
So we got awesome lineup of awesome people who are all my heroes. And I really want to get more literate, more confident in speaking about Tiriti, in speaking about the treaty referendum bill and in challenging some of the rhetoric that we hear floating around about the coalition government. So I invited these guys to this panel so that I can learn and we all get to enjoy them tonight. So you guys are awesome and you rock. And so I thought maybe we'll start off just with a 1-minute introduction of like who you are, if that works. Hello.
Kia ora, he reo no Ngāti Pikia no Ngāti Kurihoki ko Zane Wedding tuku ingoa. Whānau, I've just been around the game for a little while now, involved in different activisms, protecting Te Kaiao. That's kind of me.
Kia ora koutou, my name is Kirsty Fong, no haina me Hingapō o Kutipuna. My peoples are Hakka peoples. They're internally displaced Northern Han Chinese who fled to southern parts of China. And they are given the name Hakka, which means guest families. And I find that really fitting because here in Aotearoa, I position myself also as a guest, as manuhiri, and it is because of Te Tiriti that allows me to be here.
Sorry. Kia ora tātou, my name's Brooke. I'm tangata moana. I'm working as a coordinator with Auckland Action Against Poverty. I'm just grateful to be here tonight. Thank you so much.
Kia ora tātou, ko Max Harris, tōku ingoa, he Pākehā at hau. My name's Max Harris, I'm Pākehā. My family's from Birmingham in England and Seven Sisters in Wales and Glasgow in Scotland. And I do some campaigns work for Action Station and also some legal work. Kia ora.
Tēnā tātou, he uri tēnei o Ngāpuhi Nui tonu, ko Ngāti Kahu ki Whangaroa te hapu, ko Bianca Ranson tōku ingoa. Kia ora everybody, so I'm from the far north, from a place called Whangaroa, and I live out on Waiheke. My mahi is doing campaigning as well, mostly around oceans, and an elected member on the Waiheke local board as well. Kia ora.
Okay, so a little bit of housekeeping as well. We have got bathrooms around the corner. We have got water and snacks to keep you going. And if any alarms or anything happens and we need to leave, please go out the door you came in. There's also another exit out that side. I think that's it for the housekeeping. So a bit about how tonight is going to work. We're first going to hear a kōrero from each of these guys, a bit about what they think, and then we're going to have an opportunity for questions. So there is a board here behind me. If you go onto your mobile phone on Google and search Slido, and enter that number there that's up on the board, you'll be able to enter in questions for the panel, and you'll also be able to upvote questions that you like or you really want answered. So we'll be answering the most kind of popular questions that you guys ask. So while people are speaking, please do add questions. As I said, it's going to be really important that we all participate and build this conversation together tonight. And after we've had the Q&A, then we're going to have a break. We've got some kai in the oven. All of it's gluten-free and vegan, so enjoy that. Hummus and roast veggies and some dips and snacks and other things. If people have bought stuff, they might not be gluten-free and vegan, so please use your common sense and also ask people if you're not sure. Yeah, so let's get into it then. And this, I think you guys have conveniently arranged yourselves in a line of how you're going to talk, so let's go. You can pass the microphone back.
Awesome.
And now they've arranged themselves.
Sweet. Kia re te iwi, ko te me tuatahi e tika ana ki te tuku rāhiri atu ki ngā manu whenua o tēnei rohe whenua, te ahi kāroa, ngā uri o te kahu tōpuni. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, o tira, tēnā rā tātou katoa. Kia ora whānau, I'm Zane. It's really always kind of awkward for me to be in speaking spots like this. Like I'll look down the line and usually when I'm around this many lawyers, I'm going to court. You know, there's generational activists sitting in this line, lawyers, really, really smart people. And whānau, I didn't even finish high school, but there's this, yeah, that's what's up. There is a saying that Papa Moana Jackson would lean into, and it was like, Te Treaty was never about the treaty rights. It's always been about like this idea that he calls rightness and upholding and accepting our commitment and obligations like to each other in Aotearoa. And when I was a kid, whānau, I grew up with no te reo Māori at all. Didn't know who my whānau were, who my hapu were. But even as a little kid, when I knew nothing about treaty rights, I knew that me not having my reo as a Māori did not feel like rightness to me. And I know that like in 2024, I live in Aotearoa where many Pākehā, many tangata treaty feel exactly the same way. They understand their obligation to rightness, to ensuring that Papa Moana, again, he always used to talk about this idea of independence whilst also having interdependence. So I should have my independence, but we should also be interdependent on each other. Many Pākehā right now, they understand that there are whānau living at roto kākahi, trying to protect their wāhi tapu. You know, and they have the right to do that, but they're not just doing it because of the rights given to them through Te Treaty. There is rightness in there. It is right to protect their wāhi tapu, to uphold the obligations to their tupuna. And you know, whānau, you don't have to be a Te Treaty expert to understand that. David Seymour has this Treaty Principles Bill coming out, and it evaporates all the visionary rightness that our tupuna instilled into Te Treaty, our shared tupuna whānau. Our shared tupuna understood this idea of the rightness in independence and interdependence, that we got to uphold our own tino rangatiratanga, Article 2. Whatever. David Seymour likes to talk about this idea that the treaty or Te Treaty in Aotearoa causes division. E kao. Whānau, the only thing that causes division when we're talking about Te Treaty is when you do not honour it. When you don't uphold your commitments, your obligations to rightness to each other. I deserved my reo. My mother did not deserve to have her reo beaten out of her. There was no rightness in that. You don't have to be a lawyer, a generational activist to understand that. You can just be a kid who grew up without his reo, who didn't pass high school or anything like that to understand what rightness is. And that's why I keep taking my place here. And so when people ask, where is my place in the Te Tiriti argument, you don't have to be an expert, you just have to know what rightness is inside yourself. Nō reira e te iwi, ka nui tēnā, that's enough from me. Ka whiua te rākau ki a te ihoa.
Hi fam, so I guess what I wanted to speak to tonight, just make a few really key points about why the Treaty Principles Bill is jacked. I think first off we need to acknowledge that there aren't two versions of the treaty, there's only one, and that's the Māori one. The one that's written in English has nothing to do with the Māori one. It's a totally different document. So that's one thing. The intention of the Treaty Principles Bill, what ACT are trying to do in terms of entrenching the principles, what they're saying, what ACT are saying is that first, the treaty says that the New Zealand government has the right to govern, that the authority and ownership of land and property of all New Zealanders is protected, and that all New Zealanders are equal under the law. That's not even what the treaty says. So the treaty actually says that Māori have the right to their own te morangi tiratanga. They can keep everything that's precious to them. If they want to sell, then the Crown gets first dibs, but they did not cede sovereignty. They also didn't allow for a whole ass government to establish itself here. They allowed for a Governor General, a representative of the Crown, to be here. And it allowed for dual citizenship of Māori and Pākehā. That's it. It's nothing, it's pretty straightforward. So what this Treaty Principles Bill is trying to entrench has nothing to do with actually what the treaty says. And so we need to be really clear about that, fam. The other thing is that we have to look at this bill in relation to everything else that they're calling at the moment. So, in context and relation to all the other calls and choices that they're making through legislation. They're cutting funding to public services, they're axing Whaikaha, the Ministry for Disabled People, Te Ara Whatu. So there's a whole assault on the rights of Māori, on Pacific, on communities here that are marginalised and haven't been protected or looked after by the current constitutional arrangement. And so what they're trying to do, in my opinion, is create a groundswell and kind of making the soil fertile here in Aotearoa for big business, for privatisation. That's what they're doing. And we need to be really clear that that's what their aim and intention is. We also need to make sure that there's this narrative about this government that they're out the gate, they're kind of coalition of chaos, all that kind of thing, that they don't really know what they're doing. Yeah, that's all shit. They know what they're doing. 1,000 billion%, they know what they're up to. This is really intentional, it's calculated, and so we need to be solid in our response to that. Now is an opportunity and a time for all of us to come together, all of our kaupapa to intersect and ensure that we're solid in our response to what's going to happen. We cannot allow this government to sell off anything, and they've kind of signalled that with the partial sale of Kiwibank. Councils up and down the country are looking at selling off airports, and so this is what they're getting ready for. And so I think in terms of they can't sell, once you sell stuff off, we think we've got a cost of living crisis now. Once we sell everything off to big business, everything's going to go up. And we won't have any control about ensuring that our communities and our families are looked after and protected through a just transition, which is what we should really be thinking about. We should be thinking about constitutional transformation via Mātike Mai and organising toward that. Thinking about what kind of essential work is required to ensure that we are all working together towards those things, because that's in my mind, that's all we should be thinking about and working towards at the moment, is a just transition towards constitutional transformation that's been outlined in Mātike Mai by Papa Moana, and a whole lot of iwi and hapu up and down the country. And so those are just the main points that I wanted to make tonight, and I'm looking forward to listening to what everybody else has to say. So. Kia ora.
Kia ora tātou. I want to acknowledge Mana Whenua. I wanted to say thanks to Sephora for organising, and thanks to Zane and Brooke for those awesome openings. Also thanks to Hazar for lending me his jacket because it got really badly rained on. I just thought I'd go through just maybe 4 questions. What are the treaty principles? What is the treaty principles bill about? Brooks covered a lot of that. What's wrong with it and what can we do about it? I actually agree with Zane. Like, what really matters is that you have a sense of rightness, as Zane said. So the only reason I'm going to go through these is just so that maybe you feel a little bit more armed and a little bit more confident when you have someone annoying who's kind of pushing back on you, and hopefully this makes you feel a bit more comfortable. So what are the treaty principles? I'm not going to defend them, but what the treaty principles are is something inserted by the Crown within the Kāwanatanga sphere into law in 1975, and they do not represent the text of Te Tiriti, and there is only one significant text of Te Tiriti, the Māori text, as Brooke said. They were first included in the law for the Waitangi Tribunal to use as a benchmark, and then they were included in other laws, like laws about conservation and public health. They do water down Te Tiriti, and I'm not going to defend them, but the reason that this government is coming after them is you can think about them as a kind of thread between Te Tiriti and the existing very profoundly inadequate law and policy, and the government is trying to cut that very thin thread that exists between Te Tiriti and the existing law and policy. So what is the Treaty Principles Bill? Brooks sort of covered this already. So it's a bill that the National and the ACT Party agreed to implement in the coalition agreement, and they agreed to take it to select committee. So with any law that goes through Parliament, it goes through 3 readings, that's just 3 debates, and 1 select committee, which is just like a really focused committee. And National and ACT said they would just take it to the first debate and then the select committee. But I'm going to come back to why that can't be something we rely on. But it's based on this ACT plan, and Brooks already touched on this, and the ACT plan has 3 principles that are trying to mirror, very dishonestly, the 3 articles of Te Tiriti. So the first and the third principle fudges the references to Crown government and to equality, and there are problems with those first and third principles, but the really, really deceitful part of the bill is the second principle, where you would expect tino rangatiratanga, the ultimate and paramount chiefly authority for Māori, and where you would expect that in the Treaty Principles Bill, it says that the principle is to protect the chieftainship of all New Zealanders. So a shift from tino rangatiratanga for Māori to the chieftainship of all New Zealanders. And the effect of this bill going into law would be that wherever that very thin thread connects to existing law, where the Waitangi Tribunal was thinking about treaty principles like partnership or good faith, they will now have to think about the chieftainship of all New Zealanders. Where the conservation and public health laws were going to think about the treaty principles, they would be considering the chieftainship of all New Zealanders. We all know what is wrong with it, from what Zane and Brooke have already said, but just to add to that, the Crown obviously has done a number of incredibly awful and egregious things through colonisation. It has invaded Māori land, it has stolen Māori land, it has confiscated, the claim to confiscate the foreshore and seabed. Why I think this is particularly dangerous as a bill is it is trying to take away that foundational guarantee of tino rangatiratanga for Māori. It's claiming to do that. It doesn't mean they have the right to do that. I won't go on for too much longer, but maybe if I just say a little bit about what we can do about it. So I'm Pākehā, and I think we need to be very aware of our own lanes and our own blind spots as Pākehā, just speaking to Pākehā in the audience, but I also think that Pākehā, as people that have benefited from this racist system and from the Crown's actions, have a particular responsibility to speak up into other Pākehā. And so what I would say in particular to other Pākehā is to think about the different communities that you're in, the different spaces where you might have some authority, which might be your family, it might be your friends, it might be your sports team, it might be your community group, and to think about how you can explain this pretty clearly and convert people from people who are maybe feeling a bit uncomfortable to active, confident advocates against the Treaty Principles Bill. Because what we know is that actually quite a lot of people in Aotearoa today, including Pākehā, believe in the importance of history. So the polling from the Human Rights Commission end of last year showed that 83% of people believe that understanding our history is important, but 32% of people have not read Te Tiriti, and 32% of people feel uncertain about aspects of this. So we need to change that uncertain group into people that feel armed and confident to go away and to speak into all of their communities about this. And I'll just end with something that Margaret Mutu said at the recent Waitangi Tribunal inquiry into this bill. She said, either the person involved with drafting this has, quote, no understanding of the reo at all, or is so disparaging of the reo that they think nothing of doing it such damage. We spend our whole lives creating ways to communicate with each other in a way that enhances communication. And to do something like this to a language, anyone's language, is an unspeakable violation.
I don't know how to follow on from that, but I'll try. Te Tiriti o Waitangi for Tau Iwi. It's our first immigration document. It is the document that has allowed us to be here, to have the opportunity to be in right relationship with Hapu Māori, with Iwi Māori, and it's like when we are in a guest-host relationship, right? When I go to your house, for example, there is an inherent contract there, one of reciprocal relationship, of respect, and I think it's an honour, but it's also a responsibility for us to be together. The attack on Te Tiriti is also an attack on all of us. Okay? Because Te Tiriti, just to be clear, does not give Māori rights. It does not give Māori sovereignty. It just affirms what is. It just affirms He Whakaputanga, which was a declaration to the world of Māori sovereignty, which was already enduring, which was already there. Okay? And so I think that the Treaty Principles Bill is also a misnomer because, like Max was saying, they are trying to eradicate all of these different principles throughout, 1975, and they have a particular use, I think, in the legislative sphere, with the Waitangi Tribunal and all of their new principles coming out, but they do fundamentally aim to reconcile two things that can never be reconciled. One says that Māori ceded sovereignty and the other one says no, that is not possible, that will never happen. And we do not believe in that. And I think what I can say is that as Tau Iwi, it is our duty to rise up right now, okay, to exercise our responsibility to Te Tiriti, to exercise our responsibility to the people who welcome us here, and actually look past the really cynical ways in which they are weaponizing migrant of colour struggles. We hear a lot about this cynical universalizing rhetoric of we all belong, or Te Tiriti is divisive and everyone needs a place here and everyone needs to be treated equally. What they're doing is just cementing the status quo. They're just cementing white supremacy. They're just cementing the ongoing colonization and their cronies. It is not really for everyone. What everyone is Te Tiriti. We know that allowed one governor, the British governor, to sit alongside rangatira and be in concert with them to make decisions together of mutual benefit and common interest. And we can think if Te Tiriti was honoured, we might have other governors. We might have other seats for other people from other different lands at different points in time, right? Maybe our relationships would be a lot more localised in terms of our own local hapu, our own local iwi, and responding to what is most urgent in terms of our environment, in terms of what is happening around us, in terms of the makeup of the population. And so I think right now, I don't know, it's just important for us, Tau Iwi, to stand up together, I think, because we are seeing this pitching against of migrants, especially migrants of colour, and Māori, and saying that there is no space for Tau Iwi if Te Tiriti is there. that te tiriti is something that is divisive when actually fundamentally it is the foundation upon which we can be in right relationship together. I think I can speak for a long, long time, but I think that's most of my points.
Kia ora tātou. Yeah, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's just shared and to everyone who's come along this evening to hopefully have a bit of a discussion together after we've kind of said our little bits. But I think that not just for me personally, but for my whānau, for my colleagues, for my my workmates, for so many people that I know over the last 200 and something days, it has been really full on, and it's been really heartbreaking and devastating, and it's been a lot to carry, and that has been spilling out into workplaces. It's been kind of been affecting people in lots of different ways, and I just want to say that the part of this that gives me hope that this is like unprecedented in terms of raising the awareness and the consciousness of our nation as to what, when we really dig down, how beautiful we are as a nation, how important it is that we have te tiriti justice and that we have this incredible opportunity for katahitanga and to have these kōrero together to find a pathway forward that is really going to be about constitutional justice, te tiriti justice, and is also going to be a pathway for us to move away from this dangerous privatization that we have been on for decades and move towards the care of the collective, the care of community, the care of hapu, working together to achieve climate justice, to make sure that we have housing for everybody, to make sure that we are producing kai, to make sure that as the world is entering into really turbulent times, not only because of the climate crisis, but because of the escalation of war, like what we're seeing playing out in Gaza, well, it's not a war, the genocide in Gaza, which is escalating into a regional war, the other conflicts that are happening around the world, all of that is also going to impact us. So I think just in terms of the Treaty Principles Bill, everyone needs to be on really high alert around this. They are saying that they're going to stop this at Select Committee, and do not doubt for a second that this will go to referendum. I truly believe that. And the way that that could potentially play out is, so there'll be, the draft will be released, it'll be put through a first reading. It's a really good opportunity for you to learn the kind of what happens with legislation. It'll go out for public consultation, then it will go to Select Committee, and then they at the end of all of that, once they've looked at all the submissions, they produce a report. And that's where they're saying it's going to end. And I think what we're going to see is that there's going to be so much whipped up around this around the country that either Seymour will orchestrate a coup in National and replace Luxon so that it can go through to second reading, but it's definitely going to be something that they're going to campaign hard on to get a second term. And it's just extremely important that we stay vigilant and that we work together and inform each other of the dangers of this. And the reason that it poses such a threat is because if we really look at mana motuhake, tino rangatiratanga, if we understand he whakaputanga, if we understand te tiriti, and we understand what that means for decisions that are being made at a community and a hapu level, that is the opposite of austerity. It is the opposite of privatization. It is the opposite of capturing wealth for the few. It is about a deep care and connection and a deep democracy amongst people as an expression of your mana motuhake or an expression of your tino rangatiratanga, and that is their worst nightmare. That is the colonizer's worst nightmare, right? Because it empowers all of us. It gives us all opportunities to have what we need. And I just wanted to kind of just finish off speaking a little bit about it in relation to te taiao, and particularly what Max said. So around the legislation that the treaty principles are kind of within. And so the one that I believe is the strongest is actually the Conservation Act, 1987. And so what it says in there is that that it must give effect to te tiriti o Waitangi. And so that means that there is obligation for mana whenua, for tangata whenua to be engaged through the process of which, or projects or that involve the Conservation Act. So if we look at, for example, the Fast Track Approvals Bill that overrides the Conservation Act. So I'm from Ngāpuhi, we haven't gone through our treaty settlement, and so because it overrides the Conservation Act, it means that we have zero input into any projects that are fast-tracked. And what that means for us in the far, far north from Whangaroa, for example, where mining mogul Clive Palmer has a huge exploratory mining permit over Aotearoa for lithium and other minerals, it means that we're not going to have any input if that was to be on the fast-track list, right? And so when we are kind of looking at what are we going to do and how have we got to where we are now? How did we get to having the treaty principles? How did we get to having MACA? How did we get to having Kohanga Reo, Māori television? How did our reo come back? All of that was nothing to do with the government. That was all through the Māori protest movement. It was through the fight of people all over the motu who stood up and came together and showed unity and strength and saying, we're not going to allow that to happen. And this is going to be the most kind of the kind of pinnacle of that right now, is when we are going to have to really address the Treaty Principles Bill and unite and oppose it. But the end result of this, I truly believe, has to be constitutional justice, because if we have a left-wing government or if we have a right-wing government, you look at everything that's just been done over the last, kind of 4 or 5 decades, they've pretty much been able to roll back in about 200 and something days, right? So it shows you that the Westminster settler colonial government is fundamentally flawed, and we can never achieve what we need to within that system, right? So we have to have constitutional justice, and this has to be our time now. We don't want our mokopuna to be fighting the same fight when we've got climate change, when we need to be focusing on our kai, when we need to be housing our people, when we need to be building and strengthening ourselves, not just as tangata whenua, as all of us, as tangata tiriti. This is about the benefit of all, and it's sooner that middle-class New Zealanders can realise that they have more in common with us than they do with the wealthy elite at the very top, the sooner that we're going to be on a pathway to a beautiful and flourishing country for our people together. We're all here together. And what scares them is the beauty and the strength of what we have and what our ancestors secured for us. They knew the importance of that. So it's about the collective, it's not about the individual, and we are the majority. And if it goes to referendum, we need to remind the nation of that, because we have to bring the nation along with us. I'll leave it at that. Kia ora.
Thank you very much to everyone that's been popping questions into the Slido. Please keep doing that. The top one is still pineapple on pizza, so come on, guys. One I would like to hear is, can we circle back to why the coalition won't stop at the first reading?
It's pretty straightforward, feel nice.
Maybe there's a couple quick things. One is, in the Waitangi Tribunal hearing, they revealed that David Seymour told the public servants to act as if the bill was going to go all the way through. So that's an interesting sign. Second, Luxon has flip-flopped on this. And just last week, Winston Peters, answering on behalf of Luxon in Parliament, said the Prime Minister can change his mind on this. And then also, even if it pauses there, as Bianca was pointing out, there is this possible kind of spectre of a citizens-initiated referendum afterwards. So you need 10% of voters for a citizens-initiated referendum, and we know that Hobson's Pledge are organising, spending ridiculous amounts of money on ads, and so that risk is still there.
So another one, anyone else on that one? Another one I've got here, So we're approaching someone who's bought in a little bit to that unity rhetoric. How do we have a conversation with them and start to change their mind and open their eyes a bit?
What's the unity?
Like what you were saying, all New Zealanders, you know, we're all equal, and sort of that ACT rhetoric.
What was the question?
Why we aren't one people.
I'm like a bit blind, sorry. Advice on approaching a colleague, person, anti-Māori, presenting racist views in a conversation. How do you change someone's mind?
I don't think you can. Sorry.
You don't?
Can I suggest a response to that?
Not to be like down and out, but not something in my name, but
Think of Māori health statistics. Māori die 10 years on average, 10 years younger than non-Māori. The number of Māori in the mental health services and in the prisons, there's something wrong.
This is going to sound real weird coming from me, but with kindness, whānau. Like, that's kind of the only way we can approach this. If you approach it like you're just going to reinforce them, if you approach it with anger, if you approach it with like the reactivity to the mamai that I still hold inside me when I have those conversations, but we ain't winning any other, like any allies, we ain't bringing anyone across to us with anything but kindness. Manulani is like you just have to love things back into the flow of life. And like that's hard as for me because like there's still a lot of like burning hatred inside my heart, but I know that it's got to be with kindness, it's got to be with aroha, otherwise we ain't pulling anyone over that line. And I also know that that's rich because I'm usually that person on the front line being like, fuck you. But that would be my advice that I can't actually adhere to.
I just wanted to add that.
Sorry, there's a few people on Zoom, so we just need to, can we get the microphone?
oh yeah.
I just wanted to add that we know that like cognitive dissonance exists and that facts don't change people's minds, and that it's probably more important to move your energy to like re-enfranchising people. So talking to people who aren't talking about it, who don't already have a strong opinion. But like not to say, as you said, like not to be like down and out and like, oh, you can't convince people or bring them over, but that if you're going to put a whole lot of energy into talking about this kaupapa to people, it would be more important to talk about it to people who don't really know or don't really have an opinion, or you know have a vested interest but don't know or don't understand that because there's so many other issues going on that are way more pressing to them. So that would be my whakaro.
Question from the Zoom?
Yeah, we've got them.
Okay. Are you okay? Pass the mic. Yeah, cool.
I think we probably move in different media circles from a lot of other people as well. And like, there's two camps. There's like very racist and set in their ways, and they have but there's a huge population of people that voted for this government that just don't have a lot of information. They watch the 6 o'clock news, they read the Herald. They actually really don't have, and they don't want to be yelled at, which is hard for me. But like, yeah, exactly. Like, just slowly kind of giving them different information and like having being really knowledgeable. Like I've realized that now as well. I'm being able to just go off the top of your head with things and being able to give sources to people when they are open to hearing it, because there are more people open to hearing it than you'd think. I deal with like a lot of elderly women, and they're on Facebook, they just, they read the Herald, like that's their world, and they just like, oh well, you know, like, I mean, especially around that, the 7-8, the Oranga Tamariki thing, like, no one's read that. People don't know what, they've just heard all this rhetoric of what it is. They don't actually know. Like, that's, yeah, like, if you can slowly try and work with some people. But anyway, I'm like,
yeah, I just want to build on that as well. Like the spirals we get into on social media, if you see something and then you watch it and then suddenly you're down a whole rabbit hole and you're just constantly being fed one rhetoric. There's a story of this chick called Lucy who was coming to a lot of the Palestine protests, and we sat and talked with her over the weeks, and she was originally, you know, with the Israeli flag and with, you know, these bait as signs. And over the time, we sort of showed her different pages that she could follow, different information sources. And the last time that I saw her, she was wearing a keffiyeh and a Palestinian flag at the Palestine protest, joining us. So it is possible to change someone's mind. But yeah, I do think that actually having the conversation in a conversational way is really important. The next question on the thing. Oh, does anyone else want to go on that?
Don't want to talk too much, but just two thoughts on the like people who are like, we're all New Zealanders. I agree on like appealing to values rather than facts. We know that's what moves people, and treating people with kindness. Also making the call about whether the conversation is worth your time. But I think the value of like sticking to your promises is quite important here. Like we have promises and agreements all the time that mean that certain people are guaranteed certain things, and Te Tiriti is an example of that. That is one angle in on this. Yeah, and I think another angle is to talk about actually how normal it is in our policy and in our law and throughout life for groups to be approached differently in order to achieve equality, whether that is having a children's hospital, a specialised children's hospital, or putting more resources into reading for some people, or acknowledging that some groups have a need for greater protection for various reasons. So yeah, there's a couple of thoughts.
Yeah, just to follow on from what Max has just said, it's I think that's a really good point about, like, we entered into a contract together, we entered into this relationship together, like a marriage together, kind of, you know, and one side of it, and at the moment, I mean, that's true, right? It's like, you know, like at this point, it's like after everything that you've done, after all your gaslighting, after all your lies, after all of your abuse, after all of these things, like stuff you, like relationships over, like our mana motuhaki and tino rangatiratanga isn't, like, it's not the treaty that secures that for us. So we've had that right back and we will have it forever. But what we just need to do is we need to expect an expression of our rangatiratanga. But what we did is we entered into this contract. And it's never, ever been honoured or properly acknowledged. And even to get to that point and after the signing of it, you know, like we've seen in Aotearoa here, we have 2% of our land. You know, if you look at settlements, Māori get 1 to 3 cents of every dollar of what it's actually worth for settlements. You know, like there's so much of this kind of fear that's whipped up, and what it's doing is it's trying to hide, you know, the massacres of our people, our reo being beaten out of our grandparents. It's trying to mask and hide all of the injustices and all of the trauma that has been inflicted on our people, rather than just addressing it and finding a way forward for us as a nation, a way that we can genuinely move forward, so that we can do that in peace. Because I think, you know, like what Zane said is really, it's true, you know, like we do need to act out of aroha. But I also want to remind people that that ultimate expression of aroha, when you really come down to it and you're really being tested, yeah, that will come out as iri. Because it's coming from a deep place of love and a deep sense of justice for what we deserve and what we need to achieve, like now. You know, and it's obviously going to be this journey that we're on, but I just think if everyone can understand our collective power outside of the Westminster system, that it doesn't define us in terms of our tino rangatiratanga. And when we see movements kick off, whether it's in Whangaroa, whether it's Protect Roto Kākahi, whether it's Protect Pūtiki, Protect Ihu Mātau, what a beautiful expression of rangatiratanga. That's why our people show up for those things. Because we're going, so the law says this, the law says that, you've done this, you've done that. We know as Indigenous people, the only option that we're left with is to express ourselves in those kind of ways that defy the law. But it's absolutely true to our tikanga, to our values, and to who we are as tangata whenua, and an expression of that. So I think it's just about integrity, it's about honesty, it's about an acknowledgement of wanting us to be a cohesive and flourishing and peaceful nation that moves together with respect and a true and honest understanding of our history, which is also kind of what Max has just talked about, to inform us that we have nothing to be afraid of. How lucky is everyone in this country to have access and understanding of one of the most beautiful cultures on the planet. It's a pathway forward for achieving, environmental restoration, for so many different things. But like I said, it threatens capitalism, it threatens colonialism, it threatens imperialism, and it threatens the elite, and that's what they're about. So we're at the other end of that, and that's going to benefit the majority, and I think it's about storytelling, it's about music. I want to see the music coming out about the treaty principles, but I want to see the music coming out, get the nation singing these songs. You remember back in, when it was Mururo Atoll, Herbs and all of that movement, protest songs. Get the nation singing, make it popular, make it a movement that people buy into. So I think storytelling, music, creativity, there's so many ways to bring people along and get them to understand how we can, achieve this, walk alongside each other together.
Y'all gonna want to answer that question. Okay, so next top voted one. How should we focus our organising effort against this government?
I think, like Bianca was saying, our solidarities are really threatening, right? And further to the divide and conquer tactic that our Crown and the government uses to fragment us, to make us feel like we're alone, to make us feel like we're threatened, to make us feel like we have to constantly struggle to put food on the table and against each other because it's someone else's fault. It's usually Māori, the fault of Māori. And I think if we can, again, look at the history of our country as in the really aspirational, beautiful, generous document, which is Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and enact that in our daily practice with one another. I think that is where us being in right relationship and also changing our framework of how we relate to each other for justice, for justness, for joy and levity and love. All of these values that are laid out in Mātiki and Mai, all of these values that we can also share with each other. I think that is how we move forward, just looking at the humanity inherent in all of us, because obviously it's not working. It's not working, so there's nothing actually scary of trying something else that's different.
I think that one good thing for us to do is, first of all, kind of look at how the right are so effective and the far right. So they're well-resourced and pretty much to all be on the same page, they just go, do you love capitalism? And they're all like, yeah, and then that's it, and they're off. On the left, you've got, all of these identity politics. You've got who's an academic, who's a lawyer, who's a generational activist, who's done this, who's done that, blah, blah, blah. And everyone's going off and wondering about all of these different things, while the right are simply just like, we know what we're after, and they're full steam ahead. So one thing that I do want to say is that if we can drop that and focus on the fact that we want te tiriti justice and constitutional justice, that will take us light years ahead in terms of our ability to organise in terms of our ability to come together and build a movement is so extremely important that we do that we don't let those things get in the way and rip us apart as a movement. The other thing is there's lots of different ways, I think, if you can organise like kōrero in your workplace. So there's amazing organisations that do te tiriti workshops. So you could, like if you're at your work or at your school or wherever you are, then you could suggest that you do that. You could organise a community hui. You can make sure that you keep a couple of annual leave days stored away so that when an activation or a huge kind of hikoi or protest comes up, you can put your leave in for a day. Make sure that you're thinking about that. Don't use them all up on a trip to wherever, because numbers are really going to matter. And this is going to happen in all different ways. One giant hikoi is not going to be the answer to this, right? How many times have we done a hikoi down to Parliament, down to the colonisers' doorstep, and said, please, can we have reform? Only for them to roll it all back in 200 days. That's not going to be the answer, but it is extremely important to show us united in numbers and the strength and the power of that. You have 100,000 people down at Parliament, they cannot ignore that. 40,000 with the foreshore and seabed. 100,000 for this. That is a huge uprising in this nation, but we need to be thinking about activations, education in our communities, in our rohe. We need to be thinking about, you know, is there a movement or a protest or whatever kicking off in different parts of the country? How can we tautoko that? How can we understand it? So, yeah, lots of different ways to organise, I think. We have a group called Kaiawhina Tāmaki, which is like a community care and self-defence group. If you've been to any Palestine rallies, you'll see us there with the green fluoro kind of vests on. And so we do like kind of marshalling and community care. You could get involved with that. We're going to need a lot more people with the different hikoi that are coming up. You can find us on Instagram. You can get involved with all different kinds of campaigns and groups that's happening. But one thing I would suggest is definitely organising more hui like this and connecting with the people up here or just connecting amongst yourselves. But every time we're talking about it, every time we're organising, every time we're sharing ideas, we're actually building the momentum. We're building it right now, but we have to kind of keep it up.
Real mean way right now that you can kind of like show solidarity, go to Roto Kākahi whānau. Like get out there. There are things happening right now. Go to your local marae, pitch in. Those types of things are real good ways to show solidarity, learn that history. But right now, there is a fight for the whenua in Rotorua that's connected to all of the things that we're talking about. And if you want to focus your solidarity, we're talking a lot about protecting te tiriti. Go down there, honour te tiriti, because it's actually living like that rightness by going down there and tautokuing the people who are in the fight right now. Don't forget about mana whenua who are doing this.
I would agree with that. Also, I think just trying to be informed and knowing what's coming up. So just to add on the Treaty Principles Bill, we do have some dates. So apparently going to Cabinet on the 2nd of September, that's next week, and then apparently being introduced into Parliament in November, so 2 months between that, and then apparently 6 months for some kind of consultation period is what we're hearing at the moment. But obviously the government's also trying to do so much so quickly, and so we can't always be informed about everything. And I think, as others have said, building relationships with people so that you know your lane and you can share your knowledge and also support each other is really good. And then finally, I think joining the dots on what's going on can make it clear that we're not fighting against, 1,000 different things. We're fighting something that is unified. The same corporations that are trying to make the most of the fast track approvals bill are threatened by te tiriti and so want to push te tiriti out of the way, who are part of the same system of colonial capitalism that's driving what's going on in Palestine, which is undercutting public services and leading to cuts to whaikaha every day. And I think when we can join the dots on all these things, we can cut through a lot of language, and also it actually can seem less intimidating to take on as a kind of single project.
just want to say one more thing really quickly. That if you're not Māori, if you're tangata tiriti, and you come to the activations and you come to the hikoi, like I want you to stand there in full confidence and the full expression of yourself, because I can tell you that we are stoked to see you. And the more of you that turn up with that kind of confidence, the better. Because I'm hearing some of my Pākehā friends, for example, they're like, oh, I'm not kind of sure, or I'm not sure if I should marshal at an activation or a hikoi. It's like, we need you to show up. We need you to show up and be confident and to be passionate about why you're there, and to bring at least 50 mates, each of you, please.
Do we all have to answer? Is that what Sorry.
Good. Yeah. There's a couple of duplicate questions. We are at 8 o'clock now, which is when I suggested that we break into some discussion groups and all have a chance to speak about how we might be organising in our communities. And that is the theme of the discussion in the group. So we're all a bunch of community organisers. The challenge now is, can you organise yourself into 5 groups? And one of these guys will come and join your group, and we're going to have a conversation together now about how we can organise in our community.
There's no police here, eh? But seriously.